have met you. We haven't done that in person yet, but I hope we get to remedy that soon. I'd love to chat with you today about you, where you come from, who you are, your amazing career in the military, some of the interesting things you've done since, and what are you thinking about for the future? There's just so much, but let's just start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up, Rob?
Yeah, well, my dad was in the Navy, so I spent my very young youth in Hawaii and El Centro, California. He retired in 1975, moved back to his home state, my mom's home state of Kansas. And so I grew up in Kansas, a very small town northwest of Kansas City called Wellsville, Kansas. Great place to grow up.
Landlocked guys growing up or going to the Navy, huh?
That's right.
Is that common?
You need hard Midwesterners that can tough it out.
Is that a common thing for Midwesterners to go into the Navy?
No, it's not. I've got two or three friends from the Midwest who became Navy SEALs, but I don't think it's very common at all.
So you grew up in this, sounds like a pretty idyllic situation growing up.
Yeah, my dad was a school teacher. My mom was a first a nursing home administrator, and then later in life got her nursing degree and became a nurse. I grew up in Wellsville, graduated, got a national ROTC scholarship, and went to the University of Kansas. Walked on the football team and played. I redshirted 1 year, so I ended up playing 5 seasons with the Jayhawks. Then went into the Navy, straight into Navy SEAL training.
A 30-year career altogether in the service?
Yeah, just short. It was 29 years and 10 months. When I was retiring, a friend asked me to jump out early. He was the director of the White House Military Office. As a one-star admiral, he needed a deputy, so he asked me to retire a few months early and take a civilian appointment as a senior executive service.
That must have been another great adventure, and one that probably helped you in terms of adjusting from let's round up a 30-year military career. That was probably a nice second act that helped you to adjust to a different kind of world, I would think.
Yeah, it was a great halfway house for a military guy, right? Because I was a civilian within the Department of Defense, embedded in the White House in the East Wing. It was a good transition, and while still being close to the military, and what an experience working with the military's best: Air Force One, Marine One, Camp David, the White House Medical Office, and the White House Mess. It was just an amazing experience.
So tell us, let's start there in the middle. Let's call that your middle years. Tell us about what your responsibilities were there. You just indicated some of them. Fill it in a little bit.
So I was a deputy director of what they call WAMO, White House Military Office. So I supported the director, and really my focus was down and in. He really wanted to strengthen the culture. So we had a very large culture effort where we focused on our values and integrating strong leadership. I'm a huge believer of the Arbinger Institute and their philosophy of outward mindset. We brought Arbinger in to teach a 2-day workshop with all our senior leaders. And really, the outward mindset is about seeing other people as people and treating them as you would want to be treated, instead of the alternate perspective is to have an inward mindset where you see people as objects, as things. Either they're tools that you use to get what you want, they're obstacles in your way, or they're neither, and so they just don't matter. So it was a really great way to get the team focused on, serving each other as teammates.
And you had several different branches of the service that you were working with there. So you had to orchestrate and coordinate a lot of different activities. I would assume different kinds of cultures too.
Yeah, without a doubt. It was every service, so including the Coast Guard was assigned to us. So 5 services. There were different units that were very solely serviced from the service. For example, the Marine Corps Marine One helicopter unit that flies the president is an all-Marine unit. Air Force One is an all-Air Force unit. We had an Army transportation unit that drove vehicles around for us, and then we had several joint elements that did communications or medical support.
Back in the 90s, Rob, I had occasion to travel with then President Clinton on his first trip as president to Ireland. And it was a pinch me experience, pinch me week for this kid from South Queens. But one of the things I remember about it is being in awe of the logistics that goes into moving a president internationally, the amount of people on the ground, the logistics of communications and support and evacuation planning. I was just knocked out by the behind the curtains things I got to see from my perspective there about what a big effort that is.
It's absolutely enormous. You know, I had a sense of that when I was a young lieutenant in the Pacific, probably on that trip that you made with President Clinton and several others. Military movement almost stops because it sucks up so many air transports, and so we were stuck on an exercise in Indonesia for a couple extra weeks, waiting for that air transport to free up and take us back to
No
Guam.
kidding. I would never have guessed that. I had an opportunity one time, as I mentioned to you when we chatted another time, of making a JCOC trip with the Secretary of Defense. And I was just blown away by our military's reach around the globe.
Yes.
And the amount of stuff we have. But then to think that moving a president would suck so much of that stuff that you'd be invited to stay an extra couple of weeks on an exercise.
That's right. No, and as you pointed out, the planning and logistics and coordination is just so extensive and broad that it's eye-watering to see it executed with such precision.
So, how long did you work in the White House, Rob?
Yeah, I was there for 11 months. The tour of the current director, and then I was temporary director, and then I took a leave of absence to finish my PhD in leadership studies out of the University of San Diego. The USD was fantastic. As a military member, I spent almost 2 years in Yemen, deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. So they gave me a lot of leash to finish my PhD. But at some point, we both had the sense that either you finish or you don't. And so I took a leave of absence and really focused on finishing my dissertation with the plan to go back and take another political appointment, potentially in the Pentagon. But I reached out to a great foundation called the Honor Foundation, and they do transition support and education for special operations members. And so I was involved with them for probably 15 years before I got out. And then I just reached out and I said, look, I'm interested in what kind of crazy non-military, non-contracting, far afield jobs you have. And they connected me with the Philadelphia 76ers, which
this is amazing.
So far afield.
How varied, I can't imagine when we get into it, how varied your experiences were in your 29-year and 10-month active duty service, but then to have that exposure in the White House. Oh, by the way, you're working on your PhD at the same time. Boom, back, leave of absence, get your PhD in
leadership studies from the School of Leadership and Executive Science, Souls at University of San Diego.
On his foundation, get an introduction to the Philadelphia 76ers. Which, of course, was immediately in your sight path as to next things you might do, I'm sure.
So far afield. And that's what attracted me. I asked for something that was very unique, and the Honor Foundation said, well, we've got this guy. He's a vice president of basketball operations at the 76ers. He keeps calling us all the time, wanting to interview a SEAL. And it turns out Alex Rucker, who's a great guy, was their VP of basketball ops and executive vice president. And he knew someone who went through the Honor Foundation, understood what unique talents special operators bring to an organization, and just wanted to interview someone for their current opening, which was vice president of athlete care. And they told me that, and I said, look, I don't know anything about basketball. I don't follow professional sports. I have no idea what athlete care is, but this is strange enough that I'd like to talk to them. And I hit it off with Alex, who is a former Navy pilot. I interviewed with Elton Brand, the tremendous general manager and former NBA player. So we kind of co-created a job, which included for the first season, vice president of athlete care, which includes the medical department and the sports science performance department. They brought me in because they wanted a little bit of leadership, mentoring, and guidance with their two really deep subject matter experts that were new leaders. And so that was part of the job. They knew I came from a strategy background, a heavy emphasis on culture. So part of my portfolio was helping to develop the culture of the staff. When you think about NBA teams, there's a lot of emphasis and focus on the culture of the team, right? The head coach leads that, and it's the 17 guys and the coaching staff that are around the team that really develop that culture. And the rest of the staff is kind of a forgotten appendage. So we tried to focus on developing the culture within the basketball operations staff. The other part of the portfolio was just leadership and decision-making support. So I helped the senior leaders, Elton Brand, kind of look around corners and think about the problems they were facing to shape better decisions.
Did you notice much of a difference around other NBA teams and their culture and their leadership style? And what impact did it have in terms of their performance if you did?
There's a great, I guess, debate or philosophical discussion in professional sports, and especially in basketball, that relates to two potential pursuits. One is talent. Talent is king, right? You build the very best team, the most talented team you can. And the other one is around culture fit and the identity of the team. And so when they brought me in, they had these discussions and they said, look, and these guys had been around and in the NBA for decades. And they said there's two ways to do this. And certainly there have been teams who have won championships and maybe even multiple championships who might not have had a great culture, that didn't have a great fit, whose stars battled each other instead of worked with each other, but they still succeeded. And so the question was, in their minds, how far can we take it with the different kind of approach on culture and teamwork? My biggest lesson was around the topic of fit, right? And so at the time, we had two all-stars who were absolutely phenomenal in their own right, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, both incredibly talented, but their playing styles really didn't mesh. And a ton of talking heads and reporters and fans always commented about how they don't fit well together in just playing styles. But I also think personalities and the way they responded to each other and to coaching was just very different. Fit seemed to me to be something so important, and I could see it in the staff as well. And you know, whether you fit into the leader's philosophy or whether he valued something that you brought or not. So my big takeaway was fit is absolutely critical and is not synonymous with talent or ability to contribute, right? You can be the best in your class and still not fit with a team, and someone would get traded and then they would flourish. It's a matter of them finding their place and finding a fit that works for them. So it's not
works for their style.
Yeah, exactly. Or their personality, right? So I kind of took that on a personal basis to be like, look, each one of us have an ideal fit somewhere. Try as you might, you might not be able to make the fit work where you are. So it's okay to continue to search to find that fit.
Now, how important is it in your training, your experience, to be able to recognize the type of culture, the type of environment you're in, and adjust your own style to it? So not look for the best fit for your style, but to adjust your style to best fit the circumstance.
from a military perspective, a military person transfers every 2 or 3 years to a new job, and
Yep.
each organization has a different culture. And then special operations guys are going both into different organizational cultures. I had the great opportunity to lead a joint interagency task force for Admiral McRaven in Afghanistan. It had every government agency you could think of: CIA, Department of State, Customs, and each one of those people brought their own organizational culture. And then, of course, you tried to build an organization that took the best of all of that. And of course, we were embedded in foreign cultures and had foreign partners. And so we became very adept at rapid assimilation. And I was just watching Tony Parker's video, right? Tony Parker's the great French basketball player. And he talked about how the greats adjust their play and their style to the
Yes.
rest of the team. And that's what made a difference for him and the French national team, is when it wasn't about how he played, it was about how he helped others play better. And so I think that adjustment of leaders, of coaches, right? You might have a single coaching style, but not everybody responds to that. So you need to adjust to those around you if it's not just about you, right? If it's not one way or the highway. And if you want to maximize contribution and help people fit, then you have to adjust to them.
Well, we're talking about leadership, and you just breezed by a name of someone who, when you look up leadership in the dictionary, their name is there. Admiral McRaven. Working for him, what was that like? What did you learn? How's it impacted your personal style today?
Yeah, well, I tell you, my career was so blessed. I worked directly with Admiral McRaven, with General McChrystal, closely under General Petraeus and General Mattis. So I really saw the pantheon.
Four giants.
Yes, amazing military leadership. I guess I got to see them in action more, General McChrystal and Admiral McRaven. And one of the things that I loved about them, which I try to adopt, is their ability to think out loud and to explain their thinking. I was in a conversation with General McChrystal about leading networks, right? The National Mission Force was really a networked organization, team of teams, and all of that perspective. And he said, look, you have to lead by intent, and they can't divine that intent. You have to explain it. And so you don't explain that once, right? You get people to understand how you think and how you see and what value you're placing on things. And then when they have to change the plan, because the plan always has to be changed, they understand what the intent of the organization and the senior leaders are. So I think this ability to think out loud, to be transparent and share not only what you want to achieve, but why, helps the organization, especially a networked organization, adapt to the need.
Rob, that sounds contrary to leadership styles as my education as a young person, obviously well before your time, about strong leaders with a strong silent type, not a lot of conversation with the organizational head. So leadership styles are different, and they evolve, and you're influencing the evolution. You and General McChrystal and Admiral McRaven, General Petraeus. Well, let's take General Mattis, for example. A legend story that I heard about him was he was single, Christmas time in the DC area, and he was, I guess he was a 2 or 3 star at that time, and he he had a practice of bringing cookies around to the men who were on guard duty those days, manning entry posts, etc. He went, and there were two officers in an entry gate with a bit of a security house there. And one fellow, he got talking with them and explained, yeah, his family lived nearby, but they understood they wouldn't see him that Christmas. And he said, well, you know what? I'm finished with my rounds of delivering my cookies, as I always do at Christmas. He said, why don't you go have dinner with them and I'll take your shift. And someone arrived at the guardhouse and asked the duty officer who was in charge. And he said, well, it's General Mattis. And he said, no, I didn't ask who was in charge of the Army. I asked who was in charge of the duty officer today. And he says, no, that would be General Mattis, who then proceeded to come out from the back room and the guy's jaw dropped. Now, legend story, but it gives you a sense of the man's values, his priorities, and all the signaling that takes place when you're in a leadership role. When you encounter young people today on a campus, in a workplace, or in just your average life, and you're the dad of 3, right?
That's right. In their 30s.
30s now.
30, 34, 32, and 31.
What is your advice when people ask you, when they learn that you've had this august career, about serving in the military? My
better half is also a veteran, ER doc who worked in the Navy. She said it best in that her life is vastly better. She's a better person for her service. And I feel the same way, that certainly you're going to get great experiences, right? You're going to see the world, get some great education and training. You're going to be a better leader. The number one thing I think service provides, and it doesn't have to be in the military, it can be in any service related organization, but it helps you understand that you're part of a bigger picture and purpose, and your contributions matter, and you need to try to make a difference because you can. We both walked away from our careers with just such great appreciation for what the military helped make of us as individuals and as people, as leaders, as citizens. I don't know if we talked about this, Jim, but I'm involved with an effort to highlight cancer and special operations, and we think we're seeing significant amounts of cancer rates within the military and within special operations, and part of that is toxic exposure brought on by our jobs, right?
You did mention that to me, and I've read a little bit about it since we first spoke, Rob, and share with us about A, you had a personal incident, and B, what got you interested in, and was some of the things you told me, frankly, rocked me.
Yeah.
You told me about the incidence in young personnel of cancer and how different it is from the general population. That tells you, without a control group, that there's something interesting something fatal going on here that should be of concern to us all. And then you broke it down by different services and the incidents, and not surprisingly, but still alarming, is the number of aviators.
Yeah.
And the incidence of cancer among the aviator community.
I was diagnosed at the end of my career with prostate cancer. I went in, and one of my doctors said, you're a young guy. It's very rare to have advanced cancer that's this aggressive, because prostate cancer usually is not aggressive.
Right.
At your age, do you know if you were exposed to anything? And I said, well, I'm absolutely sure I was exposed. I don't know to what, right? I mean, I was around burn pits. I was in a job that had high exposure rates, and that includes, you don't think about the ingredients of a bullet, the toxicity of a single bullet. And for most people and most military guys, they don't shoot a ton of bullets. But a special operator a single operator is shooting more bullets than a battalion of Marines. We're doing a lot of that indoors. And so the toxic exposure is significant. And that's just job related. Then you go overseas, and there's toxic exposure there. There's lifestyle exposure. The World Health Organization a few years ago declared that night shifts were a carcinogen.
Well, all you did was work at night.
That's all we did. That's right. There's lifestyle exposures, there are environmental exposures, and there's toxic exposures that build on each other. And part of the lifestyle, which made me think of this, Jim, is right, the unending grind of decades of war, guys going on deployment after deployment after deployment, creates more inflammation in your body, and cancer feeds on inflammation. So
yes,
this is all a presumption and assumption that these are the causes. What we do know is that we're seeing a great number of young, relatively healthy military members who are diagnosed with literally dozens and dozens of different types of cancer, some very rare, some normal, but rare to occur in a 30-year-old in
Yes.
stage 4 cancer. So it's just shocking, and we need to do something both as individuals and as a nation.
Please share with us how long you've been cancer-free now.
It's been just over 5 years. So I was very lucky. My team of doctors and care professionals, I think, since who I was and where we were coming from as a family, and we were super aggressive with surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, hormone therapy. I mean, we threw the kitchen sink at it, been doing very well ever since. And I'm very heartened to see genomics and precision medicine where you can get a tailored immunotherapy to your cancer, and we're seeing breakthrough after breakthrough. So I'm very hopeful that in the coming years, we're going to get even more successful with cancer in the military when guys and gals have late stage cancer. And they have late stage cancer because they're not screened early, they're not aware of their exposures, and the medical community is
So they're young. They don't think they should even possibly be checking.
That's right. And when a guy or gal presents with a medical problem, the first thought of the care provider isn't, oh, this seems like cancer, let me screen it out. And so it's missed so many, for a year plus, as it's aggressively growing inside of them.
I have the privilege here of getting to know and work with, from a fundraising point of view, a couple of doctors here at NYU Langone, Doctors Kimmelman and Dr. Haas, who are research scientist and a lead practitioner, both around prostate, but other cancers, but heavily interested and working on prostate cancer. And they pound the table over the fact that some great advances are being made, some great treatments have been developed, and that no man really should die from prostate cancer because it's all about early detection, and then treatment options are plenty. But it's their life mission to eradicate this. But it seems to me that there's a whole world of young people in the service who we have to raise the alarm bell around to make sure they're being checked, because if it's discovered early, it's quite treatable. But right. If it's not checked, if it's not discovered, then it can become a real problem. And you do have to throw the kitchen sink out of it. And not everybody is as lucky as you are to have been able to rid yourself of it.
That's right. And
now tell me, under what auspices are you doing this work now? Is it just your personal interest? Are you aligned with other institutions to look at this issue, bring it to public attention and to the attention of the right authorities that we have this special issue going on here with the frequency of cancer among service members?
Yeah, there's several aspects of this. When I worked for Admiral McCraven and I ran his Joint Interagency Task Force for Counterterrorism, we were looking at how we get after terrorist organizations outside of combat zones, right? You're not going to go do a direct action mission in Paris, France, or Belgium. And these networks, these terrorist networks, logistics and finance spread throughout the world. The strategy we developed, I called swarming. And it was based on John Arquilla and David Ronfeld's research on swarming as a warfare method. And the deal on swarming is it's a lot of small elements who come from every direction and overwhelm a larger entity. And so what we did is we designed swarms, and we picked one guy who may or may not have been important, in the grand scheme of things, but he had a global network. And so we said, all right, let's deconstruct this global network by every agency in the government doing something against this guy's network. And that became the national strategy on how the interagency worked against counterterrorism. And so as I was looking at cancer, one, I realized that the government is never going to be responsive enough. If you look at the history of toxic exposure in warfare, including Vietnam and Agent Orange, and the Gulf War syndrome and sarin gas exposure, to the 9/11 World Trade Center exposure, you usually see years of delay before legislation and policies start to be established, and then more years before they come upon a comprehensive effort that is very helpful. You also see years and years of delays in research. Just this year, a DNA study found that it was sarin gas exposure that caused the Gulf War syndrome. That was
I didn't realize that.
decades ago. And part of the problem is, institutions are based on evidence-based response. And so if you don't have the evidence, there's always going to be some bureaucrat who not inappropriately says, hey, we have a lot of things to do and there's no evidence on this. My feeling was, look, it's going to take years before the government responds in an appropriate way. The PACT Act is a very first small step in kind of addressing toxic exposure. It's not enough. And there's more that needs to be done. It's going to take years to make that happen. In the interim, I think we need what I call a social swarm. And that's multiple organizations coming from their own charter, their own purpose. They're not sacrificing, right, what they were built to do, but they are doing what they can, and they're coordinating everything they're doing so you can see where the gaps and holes are. So I've been coordinating with more than 40 special operations nonprofits, veteran support organizations who support different tribes and clans of the special operations community to try to increase communication, to try to increase awareness. And I've also reached out to wonderful nonprofits that are beyond special operations. Two of the best are Hunter 7. Hunter 7 is a phenomenal nonprofit that does cancer research around the military, and they also support military members with second opinions and insight, and they do some kind of nurse case management. The other organization I discovered is here in San Diego called Soteria Precision Medicine Institute, and Soteria does so many things very well. They are leading the effort on genomics and precision medicine for people getting hooked up to clinical trials of their specific cancer with immunotherapy and precision medicine. But they also do amazing case management. As a cancer survivor, one of the biggest things a person faces with cancer is first their own mortality, and then thrown into the deep end of a medical community who you don't speak their language, you don't understand their culture, they're moving a mile a minute, and you go into your clinical meetings and you're just dumbfounded, and then you walk away and days later you're like, oh, I wish I would have asked about this. I wish we would have talked about that. And so what Soteria does is they prepare their partners, the people that they support, before a meeting.
Yep.
Look, we're going to talk about this. You should ask about this. Let's practice this. I haven't found anybody that does it as well. So again, I'm trying to do some fundraising for Hunter 7 and Soteria. I'm trying to rally these 40 plus nonprofits to work together and to move beyond individualized care. When I looked at, there's some great organizations. If you're a military guy or special operations guy, you say, I have cancer, they're more than willing, and they lean forward to help, right? With your travel, with incidentals, with lining you up with a second opinion. But it's an individual, one-off, one-by-one effort. So as a result, we're not learning as a community, we're not learning as a nation. And I felt like it was, your question about
it's one at a time, over and over and over again, without the system learning about getting smarter and changing the processes to be better at treatment.
Right. And I related that to your question about, well, were we really at war for 20 years? No, in Afghanistan, we were at war 1 year at a time. We had 1 year lesson. People left and they relearned the same lessons. And so now we're seeing it in cancer. So I'm trying to develop this swarm. There's another great organization, the Military Special Operations Family Collaborative. And they're a policy-oriented organization that supports special operations community. They've asked me to chair their cancer task force, which we're just standing up. And so I'm doing I'm doing all of this kind of under the umbrella of the Military Special Operations Family Collaborative.
Rob, let me ask you a couple of questions as we get to the end of our time here. There's a war going on now in Europe, which is Eastern Europe, which is hard for me to imagine. I'm saying that out loud, that it's true. Leadership and culture. A word or two about what we think we've learned about Russian leadership and culture, and you've already commented, but a little more on President Zelensky and the Ukrainian leadership and its culture.
Well, I think you can see that the Russian leadership and culture is divorced from their operating arms. They have no idea how poorly equipped and ready their forces were, and they really don't consider their well-being in any decision they've made to take draftees and send them directly into the conflict with no preparation. It's clear that the morale and the will to fight just doesn't exist in an organization when you have that type of leadership. And then you compare that to Zelensky and the Ukrainian military leaders who are in it with their troops, and they're not wasting their lives needlessly. They have well-developed plans for succeeding on the battlefield, and certainly the United States and NATO and other contributing partners have helped on the material side and on the intelligence side and on the planning side. But it's the Ukrainians and their leadership and their culture that are really making the difference. How does it end? I think it ends when senior Russian leadership realizes that there's no good to come out of it, and potentially, I think eventually Putin dies of either a natural or unnatural illness, and they make changes from there.
The other thing I wonder about is I follow Professor Jeffrey Sonnenfeld up at Yale and his research assistant Stephen Tian, and they've been chronicling and documenting what Western businesses have done vis-a-vis the sanctions in terms of pulling out of Russia. I wonder if an economic collapse isn't imminent, because I read their work, I read their research, and they're talking about how the ruble really isn't a real currency anymore, that the sanctions are having very, very big impacts. And I just wonder if we found out that culture does matter, especially in military situations. And we're seeing the impact of a poor culture in their military's performance. And I wonder if if it's not separate, but quite related to its economic circumstance, and might we see an economic collapse first?
That's far beyond my expertise, but I think back to our senior military leaders who talked about the United States economy being the number one asset. And so you can't sacrifice your economy for other national security objectives, because that's the engine. And so certainly I think there's that piece of it. And then the other question, as the economy starts to buckle, is what is the Russian population? How much will they endure before they say enough?
Rob, you're nothing short of fascinating, a genuine American hero, and I don't say that lightly. One of the confessions I'd have for you is, as an employer, when we're lucky enough to come across someone who has a military background, let alone a special operatives background, we're always wondering, could anything we'd ask them to do here ever live up to the challenge, the excitement, the energy that they've experienced in their military careers? So we're always, as employers, and I've had this conversation with others who are in my situation, we're always wondering, can we do things that are interesting enough for them? And what would you tell us?
Well, I think that certainly, right, there's nothing that compares to the camaraderie, the mission, the purpose of serving the nation in uniform. When that is over and service members move on to their next great adventure, it doesn't mean that everything has to pale in comparison, or that the food, the wine, the joy is not there in everything you do.
what I found in my short 4 years out of the Navy and looking forward to new opportunities is what inspires me, and I think what inspires military people is the ability to contribute to something that matters. And it doesn't have to be national defense. Doesn't have to be life and death, but help us understand why it matters and allow us to find our contribution points. I think I've been reading a lot about idiosyncratic jobs and creating and molding jobs to the person. I certainly think I bring something unique, but I'm not plug and play. Oh, let's put Rob in the vice president of X job, right? And so
Procurement.
that's right. So I think there's unique people that you should find a way to shape and frame jobs that may not even exist, but you can be certain they're going to be value added to an organization. And again, it's about giving people an opportunity to contribute, to shape and impact the lives of others, and that matters, right? So I look at, can I help an organization succeed? Can I help other leaders lead better?
And so there's two things you just said in there that jump out at me. One is you want to be part of something.
Yeah.
You want to understand and embrace the mission is the second. And then the last thing that comes to mind there is you want to play a leadership role. You want to bring your skills, your experiences about leadership to help any organization in its mission. I could talk to you forever. I'm a fan. I'm a student of what you're doing and look forward to getting to know you better, Rob. I think your future is mighty bright, and I look forward to catching up with you again on your next adventure, and for all of us to help support you in your efforts in your part-time gig of helping to find out why these incidents of cancer in military personnel are so much higher than the general population, seeing what we can do about it, number one, and number two, making sure care, treatment, and research happens to help those who've already been exposed and therefore are suffering or about to suffer. So I commend you for your work. Thank you for your service to our country. Sometimes it feels contrite to say that, but I've never felt it more appropriate than to say it to you. Good luck in your work on your cancer research, and I can't wait to see what your next personal career step is going to be, because you're going to make one heck of a difference.
Thanks, Jim. It's been great talking to you, and I appreciate it. It's been my honor to serve, and I hope to continue to do that in new and different ways.